Good afternoon, everyone. It is afternoon, isn't it? Yes.
Yep.
Jackie Broman here for TBA Law, and we've got one of our guest webinars today. Luckily, we've got Bec Dillon-Hensby with us today. She is a financial advisor and money coach based over in Bendigo, which is nice to have someone so close to home. But I think you do a lot of your work online and virtually, don't you, Bec? So can work for anyone anywhere. Yeah,
All
which is the
over.
nature of
Yep.
things these days. Yep. And I mean, your focus is primarily attracting women to work with you, although then you work with couples, particularly with young families, around making, I'll use what you've said exactly here, make smart money moves with ease, free from overwhelm and jargon. It's
Oh,
very
well
nice.
said.
So take it away.
Well, hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. And I'm very excited to be joining Jackie and welcome you to our workshop, Take Charge of Your Dollars. If you can believe it, which a part of me absolutely refuses to. We're almost halfway through this year, which is kind of terrifying to think that we've just blinked and ended up here. But a lot of us at the start of the year, we may have started the year with intentions and grand plans to take charge of our finances or make some of those smart money moves. Maybe it hasn't quite happened as planned yet. So this is a really great opportunity just to take pause for an hour or so just to consider, okay, well, what can I actually do with my finances for the rest of this year and beyond to set myself up for financial success, with the idea being that fast forward to this time next year, you'll be celebrating more than a few money wins. So as Jackie mentioned, and if we haven't met yet, my name is Bec. I am a financial planner, money coach, and just an all-round money nerd. I work closely with my clients to help them figure out what they actually want in life and then what they can do with their money to actually make that happen. So I give tailored financial advice on everything from money management through to investing, through to picking the right personal insurances and navigating the world of superannuation, which I'm sure as many of us know can be quite complex. Although I do work with a range of clients, I do typically work with people in their 30s and 40s. I used to be a financial planner to many retirees when I was working for one of the big banks, but time and time again, I kept hearing the words, oh, I wish I'd seen you years ago. Helping people to get on top of their finances earlier in life is so rewarding because it makes such a real difference to their financial lives, both now and into the future. And I know that if you take some of the steps that we talk about today, they can and will make a big difference to the way that you're experiencing money at the moment, but also later in life as well. So as Jackie mentioned, I am based in Bendigo, but I work remotely with clients from all over the country. I also do some face-to-face meetings around Victoria as well. And I am entering my 10th year into the industry this year, which is also terrifying to think of. So please do say hello, ask questions throughout, let us know if you have any thoughts, any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them along the way. But I do want to begin today by acknowledging the Dja Dja Wurrung people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work, and the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples watching today. Also very important, take note of this screen. Any advice and information shared is general in nature. It doesn't take into account your individual situation, goals or needs. Should you require financial advice that is specific to you, please don't hesitate to reach out. And as I mentioned, nobody wants to just sit and listen to someone dribble on about money for an hour. So let's make this as fun and as interactive as possible. I encourage you to use the Q&A box to ask any and all questions, to share any thoughts that come up for you, and I'll keep an eye on that as we go. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. So as we've mentioned, we're already well into the year, and many of us likely set some goals or some resolutions for ourselves at the beginning of the year, including financial goals. But what tends to happen for many of us is we just get caught up in our lives. Our lives are busy. There's no denying that. We're being pulled in so many different directions. It can be really easy to lose sight of those financial goals, but also lose the motivation to achieve them as well. This is completely normal and can be explained by plain old neuroscience. When we set goals, it releases the neurotransmitter dopamine, which I'm sure all of us have heard of. That's our feel-good chemical. So that's why when we originally set a goal, maybe New Year's Eve, we're feeling really motivated to take action. And we also get that same spike of dopamine when we achieve the goal. But then we have the middle part. That's the part where we actually have to do the things to make the goal happen. Now, in the middle part, we don't have the same sense of dopamine. The dopamine from that initial setting of the goal has worn off. Doesn't feel as good. It's certainly not as motivating. And that's where the wheels tend to fall off and life takes over. We want to take charge of your dollars, hence the title of the webinar, in a way that has you progressing towards all of the goals and the things that you want to do, that doesn't rely on you putting in a ton of effort. We don't want to have you need to rely on motivation or willpower to get you through the middle part, because often it just doesn't work. We want your money working for you in a way and taking care of you on autopilot as much as possible to more easily navigate the middle part and put in place some strategies and some structures now. So you just know that your money is doing what it needs to do. You can just focus on living your life and not having to dedicate a lot of time to thinking about money all of the time. I love money. I could talk about it all day, but do I want to think about it 24/7? Absolutely not. So today I'm going to show you 6 steps that you can take to take charge of your dollars and set yourself up for financial success. And hopefully by the end of today, you'll have plenty of practical strategies and actionable tips that I know can and does make a really big difference in your financial life and see you well on your way towards your financial goals. So step number 1 is to set your financial GPS, which is really about getting clear on your goals. And even though I can't hear you, I'm probably, there were a few audible moans. I'm sure I'm like, oh God, not this again. But quite often when people set about to take charge of their finances, they will dive into the numbers or the financial strategies that they can use. They will come to me and ask questions along the lines of, what should I do? Should I invest or should I pay off my mortgage? Should I contribute to super or pay off my mortgage? Should I contribute to super or invest in my kids' future? There's a lot of should questions that I often come across and that get thrown around. And my answer is incredibly annoying, and it depends, which normally comes with a few eye rolls. Depends on what you want, depends on what you're trying to achieve. Knowing what it is that you want and what you're trying to achieve and what you want your life to look like is an incredibly important part of the financial planning process, because ultimately it's your goals and it's those decisions that are going to guide your strategy and what you should actually practically do with your money on a day-to-day basis. Now, you can create a plan that is just based on numbers or just makes mathematical sense, but in the end, it makes absolutely no sense for your life. So just like an actual GPS, financial goals really help direct you in terms of what direction you should take with your money. Having an idea of the direction that you're heading in is going to show you the financial steps that you need to take and make this process a lot easier. Because if you think about it, if we're going somewhere that we've never been to before, we don't just get in a car and drive and cross our fingers and hope for the best, because we might end up in the completely wrong place, particularly if you have my overall sense of direction as well. You want to know where you're going, you want to know how to get there, and you also want to know the quickest and best route to getting there as well. So your goals, your financial goals, they are your GPS. They will help you know, okay, well, what steps do I actually need to take with my money on a practical level to get to where I want to go as quickly as possible? Because honestly, I will have someone and go, I just want to build wealth, want to have more money. And if I'm just looking at that, if we just focus on the numbers, if I'm just looking at their financial situation, there are a million different directions you could take. There are a million different strategies that you could adopt. Knowing where you're going is going to help narrow down the options that make the most sense for you. And it's going to remove that sense of analysis paralysis that I'm sure every single one of us here feels when we have a bunch of options that are available to us and we don't know which one to take. Having a sense of where you're going will help you eliminate the options that don't make sense for you and make that decision-making process much easier. So it doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out process. Just get some thoughts down onto paper and do write them down. There have been several studies that show that writing your goals down means that you're far more likely to achieve them. So put pen to paper, put fingers to keyboard, just get something out. It can be really helpful just to fast forward to different moments in time and think about where you want to be in those moments. So as an example, let's fast forward to 12 months from now. Let's say we're having a Take Charge of Your Dollars alumni catch up for some reason. What are we celebrating? What's happened over the last 12 months? How does your life look different financially? In this process, make sure that you look beyond the short term and consider the medium and long term too. As humans, we have a bias towards short-term thinking. We are far more likely to focus on goals that can happen sooner rather than later because of the sense of gratification, because of that dopamine release that we were just talking about. We are going to naturally prioritize the short term because we get the reward sooner rather than 20 years down the track. But it is incredibly important to think of the long term too. So in that case, I want you to think about, we've become a great group of friends and now we're catching up 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years plus from now. What are we celebrating? What's happened over that time? And how does your life look different financially? When you start to think through, and again, you don't need to spend a ton of time on this, just by starting to think through some of these things, that is going to naturally reveal some of the areas that you need to start financially planning for. So for example, if you're thinking forwards in time and you're in a different home or a new home, okay, well, maybe we need to prioritize saving for a house deposit and getting your cash flow sorted so that you can get your finance in order. Or maybe if you're thinking of a luxurious retirement where you're sailing Europe on a yacht, well, we probably have to start showing some love to your superannuation. If you want to send your kids to private school or you want to gift them with a car or a house deposit when they're older, well, maybe we need to look at an investment strategy. So as you can see, when you start to work out what life has ahead of you or what you want it to have, ahead of you, that's going to make a really big difference to the approach that you take with your money. And it's going to make the process a lot easier because you're going to be able to clearly see what it is that you need to do. So my 2 biggest tips with goals, write them down as we spoke about, but be as detailed as possible, because getting detailed, it's going to show you what you need to do with your money to achieve those goals. Because if you just say, I want to buy a house, cool. It gives you absolutely nothing to work with. How do you know what to practically do with your money from that? But if you start to put some details around that, such as, okay, well, when do I want to buy this house? What location does it need to be in? What are your non-negotiables? Like, for example, maybe you need to have a second bathroom because you absolutely do not want to stand on a kid's toy ever again. Maybe, like in my husband's case, it's having a shed so he can get away from me sometimes. Think about how much it's going to cost, how much of a deposit that you'll need. That's going to give you so much more to work with. So step number 1, when it comes to taking charge of your money, it sounds simple, but it can be complex. It's hard to know what we want sometimes. It's just to get clear on why you're doing any of this money stuff in the first place. Because no one wants to sort out their finances, really. But why are you going to? That's going to help give you a really great, it's going to help you align your financial plan and strategy for what it is that you want. Because if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. So then step number 2 is to develop a plan around how you practically manage your money on a day-to-day basis. So when money comes in, what is actually happening with it? Because I can hand on heart say that it is money management that makes the biggest difference when it comes to our entire financial life, because money management or our cash flow feeds every single aspect of our financial life. So the gap between what we earn and what we spend is the money that we have available to do all of those amazing things that you just pictured in the goal setting exercise. So being really intentional about how you go about realizing that gap and then what you do with that money is an essential part of taking control of your money. So as I mentioned, I can hand on heart say money management provides the biggest transformation, no matter how much you earn. I have worked with people that earn hundreds of thousands of dollars. I have worked with people that earn very little. And for every single one of them, money management brings about the biggest transformations for all of them. Because done well, it supports every single aspect of your financial life and makes sure that you're actively working towards all of the things that you want or the things that you need to financially prepare for, but in a way that doesn't command much time or effort and require that continued sustained motivation. So in terms of where you start with money management, it's actually getting a bit of a lay of the land and working out where you stand financially right now. So by getting a sense of understanding about what's happening with your money when it comes in and then where it's going, that's going to help you ascertain how much money, if any, you have left over, that gap that we were just talking about, and being able to allocate that towards your goals and what it is that you're trying to achieve. Now, please don't skip this part, because most people are tempted to just skip this part and start fresh. They will want to set a budget or create a financial plan based on what they think they should do or what an ideal number should be. But before setting a financial plan or a budget, it is so important, and I cannot stress this enough, to understand your current situation as it is right now. Because skipping this part, and we've seen it before, it can and certainly does lead to an unsustainable plan that doesn't work for you. We need to gather some data about your current financial behaviors and your current spending, and that's going to provide you some really valuable insights that's going to help you make better decisions and create a plan that's actually sustainable and works for you in your life. Because honestly, understanding your current habits with money is key to your financial success. So again, this doesn't have to be complicated. We love to overcomplicate things in the world of finance, but you can do this on a scrap bit of paper. There is a spreadsheet on my website if you'd like to download it, but we just want to document money in and money out. How much money is coming in? How much money is going out? Where is that money going? And how much is left over? They're the key bits of information that we want to know. Please use actual data, not guesstimates. In my experience in working with hundreds of clients, most, if not all, and myself included, we very much underestimate how much we actually spend in certain areas, particularly in groceries. Most of the time when we do sort of an information gathering activity, my clients will estimate, oh, you know, I spend $200 on groceries, and then it's normally about double what they think they actually spend. So please actually gather some data. So we really want to accurately track your expenses. So review your bank accounts, just research what your spending has been in certain variable areas, such as grocery, fuel, eating out, and those kinds of areas. That's going to provide you with a much clearer picture to help you determine how much money you actually have available to dedicate towards all of those goals. So once you've done that, you'll have something that looks like this. You will see what that gap is. And if you're in surplus, so surplus just meaning that you're spending less money than you earn, or in a deficit, meaning that you're spending more money than you earn. Just a note here, if you are in deficit, please don't punish yourself over it. Please don't feel guilty over it. Most people, when they start this activity, when they haven't been conscious to their spending, are in deficit. And you'll find that by going through this activity, you and just bring about some awareness with what's actually happening with your money right now, you will very you'll be able to very easily correct that. So please don't see the number, feel completely defeated and just leave it and bury your head in the sand. Honestly, going through this activity, it's going to highlight some areas that you can have some quick wins in and bring you back to budget surplus. Then once you've done that, then and only then do you actually think about making the improvements or establishing a budget or a financial plan, because you're going to be enriched with so much more helpful information to actually put it together. So you look at the gap and you ask yourself, is this actually going to leave me with enough money to do all of the things that I want to do? So all of the things from step one, do I actually have enough money to do this? If the answer is no, which it often is, go back and take a look at your money in, your money out. Where can you create some space there? Is there something that you can do to increase your income? Is there something you can do to reduce your expenses? Maybe set some boundaries or some guidelines as to how much you'd like to spend in each area. So if going through the activity, you work out that you're spending $400 a week on groceries, hey, maybe you can target $380 and then you've found an extra $20 for your goals. If you do that across every single one of your expenses, including your fixed expenses as well, definitely research and compare all of your bills, mortgages, and everything like that. If you can do that across every single one of your expenses, you're going to create a lot more space. Once you've found that extra space and increase the gap between what you earn and what you spend, we actually need to make sure that this happens. This is an important part. We don't just stop at, okay, cool, we have a surplus of 20 grand. We need to make sure that actually happens, because it is no good just living on paper or on screen, which can sometimes happen with some budgets. So we want to do that with a money management system that's automated, so we don't actually have to think about it. We want to allocate money to where it needs to go, so that gap actually happens in reality and that money is being directed towards your goals without you having to think about it. We want to remove human interference. So a really easy way to do this is using a bucket methodology, which is a simple and effective way of managing your money. This is popularized by the Barefoot Investor book, but the bucketing methodology of budgeting has been around in many different forms for many years. In fact, pretty much any personal finance book that you pick up will have some iteration of this, because it's nice and simple. And it's basically a system that involves dividing your income into different categories, or what we call buckets, based on the purpose of that money. So by doing this, it's going to give you a really clear understanding of where your money is going each week, fortnight, month, year. And it's going to make sure that you're using it in a way that aligns with your goals and what it is that you want your life to look like. So you can use any buckets you like, any categories you like. Some that I found that work really well is to divide your income into 4 different categories. So we have bills, day-to-day, future spending, and goals. So the bills bucket is for exactly that, bills. So these are expenses that are fixed or recurring. So things like mortgage or rent payments, utilities, phone bills, and so on and so forth. The essential expenses that must get paid every month or year. Day-to-day spending is walking around money. So that's for day-to-day expenses that vary each week. So they would be things like your groceries and your fuel and eating out, anything you sort of tap in your card for on a weekly basis or a day-to-day basis. Really want it to cover your day-to-day needs. Then we have a future spending bucket. This is still for spending, maybe more lifestyle expenses, but the expenses that you're not necessarily having every single week. So those are the things that you want to account for. So that might be things like buying yourself clothes, getting your hair done, car servicing, whatever, the things that you want to put money aside for. But if you allocated that into your day-to-day bucket, it's probably going to get eaten up on a day-to-day basis by some of those day-to-day costs. And that means that you might potentially fall short for those things when they do actually arise. And then we have goals buckets, which is saving for specific goals, such as an emergency fund, house deposit, making contributions to super or investments, and so on. This is really the heart of this, is that it's going to allow you to separate your spendable and non-spendable money. So you can open up your bank accounts at any one time and know how much you're able to spend. And you don't have to open up a spreadsheet or pick up a calculator. You want to be able to know within a split second how much of your money you can spend and how much you need to keep your mitts off to stay on track towards your financial goals. And this one change alone makes managing your money a million times easier, and it does take a lot of the thinking out of it. You just look and know, you don't have to guess, which is really important. So use the data that you gather when you are going through your income and expenses and have this all happen automatically. Work out how much needs to be allocated to each bucket each time you're paid and set up some automatic transfers so it just happens. So for example, you will now know how much all of your bills or recurring costs are. So work out what they add up to over the course of the year, total them up, and then work out how much you need to put aside each pay to cover them. So that way, your really only job becomes managing the spendable money and avoiding the temptation to dip into the non-spendable money, which takes a bit of practice, but you'll get there. All of your bills are going to be taken care of, and you're going to naturally be moving closer to your goals every single week without having to think about it. So we're removing human intervention, because when we bring our humanness into these things is where things tend to fall off the rails. Myself included, if my system wasn't automated, I wouldn't be saving anywhere near as much as I am. I can assure you that much. Will look different for everyone, and it should. This is because we all have different needs. There are no set buckets you should have. There are no set percentages that you should use. It's all about designing a structure that works for you in your life with the elements that we've discussed today. But if you incorporate separation and automation, you will progress towards your goals. I can promise you that. So in summary, step number 2 is to establish a day-to-day money management plan that sees you working towards your goals on autopilot. Do this by establishing where your money is going now, and then allocate it accordingly towards your goals, and I guess determine where it's going to go in future. At the start of the workshop, I spoke about the fact that as humans, we have a bias towards short-term thinking. It is so much easier for us to envision ourselves next week, maybe even 6 to 12 months down the track, than it is to envision ourselves in our 60s. Unfortunately, what that means, though, is created for many of us a disconnect between us and the money that we have in our superannuation. Because in some cases, it's not something we're going to be able to access for 20 to 30 years. So when an annual statement comes in, we might give it a quick once over, but likely it ends up in the bottom drawer or in the email inbox graveyard somewhere left to die. Becomes a later thing. We have so much going on in our lives right now. So prioritizing our finances for when we're in our 60s and beyond, it's not even crossing our minds, let's be honest. We know that we'll look after it later, so we kick that can down the road and we tend to focus on what's happening right now. But as I also mentioned earlier, I previously used to provide advice to a lot of people in their 50s and 60s that were at or near retirement. And time again, I'd heard, wish I'd seen you when I was younger. I wish I'd started when I was younger. And I was having heartbreaking conversations with people that realized that they weren't going to be able to live the sort of life that they wanted to in retirement after working so hard for so many years. They just really hadn't focused on money until that point in time and had so much regret for not starting sooner when they realized all of the missed opportunity. Because time is really the magic ingredient when it comes to our money and when it comes to our finances. So while, of course, right now we want to be focusing on growing our wealth to live a great lifestyle now, we also want to show some love and care for our superannuation so that we can continue that great lifestyle no matter what age we are. And a few small changes and considerations makes a very big difference. So step number 3 is to sort out your superannuation. So I encourage you, dig out that statement from your bottom drawer or from your email inbox, and I'm going to show you a few key things to look out for. Firstly, where is your superannuation? What super fund are you with? Do you have one fund or do you have multiple? Are there any from earlier in your career that you might have forgotten about, which is quite often the case? If you're not sure, log into MyGov, connect to the ATO portal if you haven't already, and that's going to give you all of the information that you need to know. If you ever book in an appointment with me, I can check this for you as well, but just go to the ATO portal, click on superannuation and fund details. It will show you all of your superannuation accounts that are linked to your tax file number. Once you know where your superannuation is and you have a statement in front of you or the online service is open, the first thing to look at, and normally where our eyes are naturally drawn to anyway, is the total balance. How much do you have in super? How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you're on track, or maybe you're a little bit behind where you should be? If you don't know, we can have a look at the average. So this is data released by the the Association of Super Funds Australia, ASFA, last year, which showed us the average super fund balance by age and gender. It's a really hard table to read, but if we have a look here, so this, if you are a male aged between the age 30 to 34, your average super account balance was 51,175. If you're a female, it was 42,240. I will not get on my feminist rant here. Needless to say that needs to change, and I'm doing my best. But just have a look at where you're at and if you feel like you're on track. If you are behind, don't let that completely derail you, because sometimes we can see these numbers and go, well, that's it, I'm stuffed. The beauty of this is we can make some small changes to grow your balance and make sure your superannuation is working for you as it should. The next thing that we want to look at are your contributions. This is on the statement. It will likely be listed as a total amount, but they will also generally provide you with a transaction list too. If you're employed, firstly, check if your employer is actually contributing in the way that they should. It doesn't always happen. I still can't believe in this day and age, but there are still some employers that are not paying superannuation or not paying as much as they should. So we want to stay on top of that. Most people are fine, most employers are fine, but it doesn't hurt to check. So as it stands, they should be contributing 10.5% of your pay to superannuation. Make sure what's gone in actually matches with that, because just because it's listed on your pay slip doesn't mean that the funds have been contributed to superannuation. So again, just dot those I's and cross those T's to make sure. This amount will actually be increasing over the coming years by 0.5% each year until we reach 12% in 2025. If you're self-employed, are you actually making contributions? Being self-employed myself, I know that there are so many competing priorities from a cash flow standpoint. Just consider if maybe making some contributions to super can form a part of your strategy to help you save for that future financial freedom. And that goes for every single person in the room. Is there room in your financial strategy and cash flow to consider making extra contributions to your super? This can significantly boost your super savings, may potentially save you money in tax, and you might also be able to leverage some government benefits such as co-contributions or tax offsets, depending on your situation as well. We also want to check how your money is actually invested. So unlike a normal bank account, when money is contributed to super, it is actually taken and invested across various different assets. So that means your money will be taken and invested in things like shares or Australian shares, international shares, or property. So most super funds will normally have a few different investment strategies that you can choose from. And it's important to consider if the investment option or the strategy that you're in is actually suitable for you. So most people are simply invested in the standard or the default option, but in many cases that might not be the best approach for you. So on your statement, it's going to tell you what investment option you're invested in. A tip is to look for words like balance, conservative, or growth. I've included some examples from some common industry super funds here, but this really doesn't tell us very much. If you're invested in the balanced option, what does that actually mean? This is where doing a little bit of extra homework and having a look at the super fund website can be helpful. So let's take a look at, this is Host Plus, the balanced investment option. So yeah, let's say if you're invested in this balanced option, if we take a look at the website, it's going to show us a little bit more information about where your money is actually invested. So you can see They're aiming to have 21% invested in Australian shares and so on. So we want to consider if our money is invested in a way that aligns with our needs, our values, and our future goals. So a couple of things that we want to look at within the investment. Is your money invested in a way that aligns with your comfort when it comes to risk? So as I mentioned, when you invest into superannuation, or money is contributed to your superannuation, it's invested across a range of different assets. Each of those assets that it's invested into, they have different characteristics in terms of risk, so how much risk you take, but also the level of return that you're likely to experience as well. So generally assets that are considered higher risk, so that would be things like Australian shares, international shares and property, they offer the potential for higher returns over the long term, while investments that are considered lower risk, they tend to offer stable but lower returns. So this graph, it's a bit hard to read, but this shows you if you had $10,000 invested in a conservative portfolio versus a growth portfolio from January 1992, the brownish purple line is the conservative portfolio and the green line is the growth portfolio. So as you can see, the growth portfolio has performed significantly better and is worth a lot more, but you can see that there's been a lot of ups and downs throughout that. So it has experienced more volatility. So everyone's comfort level with risk is different. Some people may be comfortable with higher risk in the hope of achieving higher returns. Others may not have the heart for it and prefer to take a more conservative approach that focuses on protecting their money and their capital. It is important to understand that people that are younger, perhaps in their 30s and 40s with longer investment timeframes, particularly with superannuation, it's not something that you will access until at least age 60. You have more time to ride out the ups and downs of the market. So potentially you can afford to take on more risk when it comes to investing in superannuation. But ultimately, we want to know if your current investment aligns with what you need and also what you're comfortable with too. Also, a conversation I've been having a lot more recently is actually considering if your superannuation is invested in alignment with your values. So as I mentioned, it's taken and invested in shares, so different companies. Let's say you don't want your superannuation invested in fossil fuel companies or tobacco or gambling. You can actually drill down to the individual holdings, so the individual companies that your super fund is invested in. And so this is the host plus balance. This is taken from their website. They have a spreadsheet with all of their investment holdings. We can see things like they're invested in Philip Morris International, which is the biggest tobacco company in the world. Companies such as BHP, who are responsible for mining iron ore and coal, or PointsBet, who provide gambling products and services in Australia. So if there's something that you're particularly passionate about or interested in, this can be a lens that you view your superannuation through as well. I don't know why this is blurry, but bear with me. It's also important to check the investment returns. How is that investment actually performing? What percentage return is your investment getting? So it will generally show you maybe a 1 or 3 month, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year. I really want you in the review to focus on the long-term returns. So 5 years, 10 years plus. Remembering that we're investing for the long term, short-term returns can be highly volatile and unpredictable, particularly last year. We saw wild time in the markets last year. Looking at long-term returns, they tend to give us a more stable and reliable indication of how an investment is performing. You will have heard, if you've ever seen one of the ads where the people, I can't do it, they do something like that. Past performance is not a guarantee of future performance. That's true. But if we can see that an investment has performed well over the long term, that's a sign that the fund has been managed well and has provided satisfactory returns over the long term. It's also important to give consideration to what fees you're paying. So they will charge a range of fees, from administration fees to investment fees. Just check what fees you're paying and make sure they're reasonable. Massive caveat to all of this is, I cannot stress this enough, it's important to note that fees shouldn't be the only factor that you consider with your superannuation. There has been a narrative that has been popularised by a personal finance book that I mentioned earlier, that lowest fees are best. Sometimes a fund with higher fees may still provide better value if it has stronger investment performance that outweighs the fees. So they're definitely not everything. The best way to get an oversight of what fees you're paying are actually, it's hard to read on your member statement. So run your eyes over the product disclosure statement or the member handbook, which are freely available on the super fund websites. Each super fund will provide you with a table like this that compares the fees and costs, and just in a really easy to see way. We also want to check your insurance. So many super funds will provide a standard level of life insurance and total and permanent disability insurance, in some cases income protection too, which I'll talk more about soon. Check if you currently have any of this cover within your fund and consider if it covers what you actually need. Please note before making any changes, so consolidating superannuation or even changing superannuation funds off the back of your review, it can feel like a really quick win, but we need to pay close attention to the insurance in your super before you make any changes. When you move super from Fund A to Fund B, you will lose any benefits that you hold inside Fund A, including insurance. So if you don't take proper care, it can leave you underinsured, even uninsured in a lot of cases, or maybe move to a more inferior policy. And once the insurance is gone, it's gone. And if you have health issues or an occupation that's considered more high risk, that can be quite difficult. So consider getting personalised advice before making any changes to your superannuation so that you're not left in a worse position. So step number 3, sort out your super. Even just paying some attention to your super statement when it comes in and getting curious about what that information actually means can be so beneficial, and it will pay dividends in the long run. In the first 3 steps, we have talked about some pretty exciting things. So you have a clear idea of your goals and what it is that you're doing with all this stuff in the first place, and why you're doing this stuff in the first place. You'll put in place a money management plan that's going to see you making those things happen on autopilot. And you'll now have reviewed your superannuation and maybe made some changes that is going to make sure that you can continue that great lifestyle later on in life as well. So in all of those steps, what we're doing, we're essentially creating your plan A. We're creating your plan A to grow your wealth. But an important part of taking control of your finances is actually considering what might go wrong and preparing a plan B so that you can weather any storms that life throws your way. So a few important questions to consider. What would happen if your income stopped tomorrow? How would you keep paying the bills? How would you continue to do all of those amazing things? So there are a couple of things that you can and should do from a financial sense. Firstly, establish an emergency fund or a buffer or a rainy day account, whatever you want to call it. Essentially, it is a separate savings account to everything else. It's a good idea to aim towards having about 3 months worth of your core living expenses to give you a bit of breathing room if something unexpected does happen. If you lose your job, if you experience a downturn in your business, if you have a medical emergency, you need to pay your car or house insurance excess, you just have a pot of money sitting there waiting to take care of you. Last year, I had 3 big unexpected expenses all within a couple of weeks, and I can testify how good it felt having an emergency fund because I could just deal with what was in front of me, not having to spend time worrying about or thinking about how I was going to pay it. So I highly recommend having an emergency fund in place. If you can't afford to go without your income, then ensuring that you have personal insurance in place is another strategy you can take to mitigate some risks. So in Australia, we have 4 main types of personal insurance. We have life insurance, which is what most of us have heard of, which pays out a lump sum in the event that you pass away or are diagnosed with a terminal illness. That's generally used to support your family by paying out any outstanding debt and potentially replacing your income while they get back on their feet as well. Total and permanent disability insurance, which again pays out a lump sum, but this time in the event that you were to be so sick or injured that you were unable to ever work again. That's also generally used to pay out outstanding debts, cover any medical or home modification costs, and replace your income. Trauma insurance is a cover that provides you with a benefit if you're diagnosed with one of the defined critical illness. So that would be things like cancer, heart attack, or stroke. That's generally used to cover medical costs and just to help you get back on your feet financially while you focus on healing. And income protection, most of us would have heard of too, that pays you a monthly benefit to replace a portion of your income, most commonly 70% up to 70% if you can't work due to injury or illness. You will likely already have some cover in your superannuation, and you'll find that out in your superannuation review. As I mentioned, most commonly life and total and permanent disability is sometimes income protection, although that's rare. So it's important to consider if you have enough cover in place and if that cover is suitable for you. The next question is, okay, well, how much do I need? And my answer, I am sorry, again, is it depends. I told you it's very annoying. It's dependent on you, your circumstances, and it looks entirely different for everyone. So it can be helpful just to consider, okay, if something like that were to happen to me, what would I like to have happen and what would I need to have happen? So if you were to pass away or become disabled or sick, what would you like support with, and ultimately how much is that going to cost? So as an example, and I know no one likes to think about it, but let's consider, okay, well, if you were to pass away, what would you like to have happen and what would you need to have happen? Would you like to have funds available to cover your funeral costs? So Money Smart says that can vary between sort of $4,000 to $15,000 a year in total, depending on the type of funeral that you'd like to have. Would you like to repay some or all of your debt? So for example, would you want to clear off the mortgage, any personal loans, credit cards, and those kinds of things, so that your loved ones didn't have to sell the house or other assets to cover the repayments? Would you like to replace some or all of your income, because the loss of your income may have a significant impact on your family's future well-being? It's going to reduce their ability to cover their day-to-day expenses and maintain their lifestyle. And combined with the grief of losing a loved one, that can be quite challenging. I just want to note here that this is also an important consideration for those that are not currently earning an income, such as a primary caregiver. In the event of your passing, would your spouse need to take time off work to care for children, or maybe they need some extra help around the house as well? So it's important to factor this into. Quite often people say, oh no, I don't need it. I'm just looking after the kids. Well, I would argue that it's very essential. So don't write that off. So running through different scenarios can help you determine how much cover you need. Again, this can be quite complex. So if you get stuck, please reach out and we can complete an insurance needs analysis to determine what cover you need and how much. So once you have an idea of how much cover you need, it's important to consider the cover that you have currently. So you might have some of that cover default in your superannuation that I spoke about. Is it enough to provide you with that desired outcome? And is it the right cover for you? Sometimes it may be. Default policies in super, they can be limited. This is because the super fund, they're the owner of the policy rather than you, so they can make changes to that cover without your say-so. So they can change things like terms and definitions of the policy. So owning a policy personally can help you ensure that you're the one that's in control of the cover, not the super trustee. So in summary, step number 4 is just to consider what risks might you face in your financial plan, and putting in place a plan B to combat those, to mitigate those. And step number 5 is to get your estate planning sorted, which is basically another critical aspect of having a plan B in place. Now, if even hearing the words estate planning makes you uncomfortable, you are 100% not alone. It's hard to talk about, it's hard to think about, but it is so essential, and it's one of the really important ways that you can protect yourself and your family. I'm sure we have all heard the horror stories of, or even experienced some of the horror stories of what happens when someone passes away and they haven't had their estate planning up to date. So paying some attention to this now, it's going to help you to ensure that your wishes are met, not only if you pass away, but if you become unable to make your own decisions yourself. So you get to decide who will make your medical and personal and financial decisions if you can't make them. If you haven't already, please reach out to Jackie and her team, who are complete experts in this area, and they will be able to give you some important legal advice in these essential areas. What you need will vary from state to state, and it blows my mind how different it is. It can vary quite a bit. So speak with an estate planning specialist. I highly recommend you speak to Jackie. Some of the basic estate planning aspects that you would want to consider are a will, which is the one most of us are most familiar with. That's a document that sets out your instructions about what you want to happen to your assets when you pass away. So that includes distribution of assets, your belongings, also nominating a guardian for your children as well. We have enduring power of attorneys, which is a document that appoints someone to make your personal and financial decisions in the event that you're unable to make them yourself. An advanced care directive is a document that sets out your wishes for future medical treatment if you've lost capacity to make those decisions. But you can actually appoint what we call a medical treatment decision maker, which is a document that legally appoints someone to make those medical decisions on your behalf if you can't make them yourself. And super and insurance binding beneficiary nominations. So this is where you set in place appropriate beneficiary nominations for your superannuation accounts and insurance policies, because these are what we call non-estate assets, and they don't actually form a part of your estate. They're treated separately from your will. So this is where you give the superannuation fund clear instructions about who you would like, and legally binding, if you have a binding nomination, who you would like to receive the funds upon your passing, rather than leaving it to the discretion of the super fund trustee or the insurer. So reviewing these things regularly, it's going to ensure that everything occurs as you want it to and keeps up with your life changes as well, to protect you and your loved ones. So consider your estate planning needs, reach out to an estate planning specialist such as Jackie, get the documentation sorted and review it regularly or as your life changes. Okay, we have covered a lot and I promise I'm almost done talking. But the great news is if you follow steps 1 through 5, you are going to establish some really solid financial foundations, and you're going to start to grow your wealth in a way that is going to get you closer towards your goals and all of the things that you want to achieve, and protect you and your money from some of the harsh winds that life can throw our way. Now is where we focus on building your wealth, supported by those strong foundations that you're going to set in steps 1 through 5. And we do that through investing. So investing is where we make your money work for you rather than the other way around, which is kind of cool. So we use your money to make more money, and then that money to make more money, and that money to make more money. And I think you get the point. Investing is where you buy an asset, so something like a share in a company or a property that will ideally grow in value over time and provide you with an income along the way. So I'd love to know, for those that are live, pop in the Q&A box. So are you investing at the moment? Let us know, yes or no, in the box. Will I have a sip of water? Yes, I love it. Excellent. And for those on the recording and for those live, I would almost bet that every single one of you are actually already investing. Remembering that when we reviewed your superannuation, that money is being invested in assets. So even if you just review how your superannuation's invested, you are being a pretty great investor. But money invested inside superannuation is something that we won't be able to access until at least age 60. So that's why many people choose to invest outside of the superannuation environment to help them reach goals that are going to fall prior to age 60, or even support them in retiring earlier. If you don't want to work till 60, building assets or investments outside of superannuation can be a way to support you in retiring earlier as well. So investing is all about creating wealth over time by putting your money in assets that have the potential to grow in value, which can then be used to support your future financial goals. So you could be looking at something like, you may want to buy a home, maybe you want to retire comfortably, maybe you want to ensure that your kids' education is taken care of, or something else entirely. Investing can be a great way to help make those goals a reality. I do encourage you to consider completing steps 1 through 5 first. I can't stress that enough. Many of us, like, investing is the exciting part of finance, right? And so many of us are tempted just to do that and maybe skip those previous 5 steps. But I really encourage you giving them some time and attention first, because that's going to mean you're going to understand your goals and what you're trying to achieve, which is going to help you determine your investment strategy and what to invest in, and again, make the process much easier. You're going to see how much money you can afford to invest. And you're also going to have a plan B in place that just in case something goes wrong, you're not having to dip into your investment portfolio. How do we make money from investing? Let's use shares as an example here. So a share is just a portion of ownership in a company. So that means that when you buy a share in a company, you effectively become a part owner of that company, which is pretty cool. So one example that I like to use a lot is, let's say that you own shares in Wesfarmers. They happen to own Bunnings. So that means that the next time you make your 10th trip to Bunnings for the weekend, you can walk through and be like, yeah, I own this place. Very, very small part of that place, but you are a part owner. Now, the reason that people buy shares or invest in any assets is to build their wealth. And we can make money in 2 different ways. So firstly, through capital growth, which is just the increase in the value of that asset. So you might buy a share for $100, and then over time, its value increases to $150 or $200. You then sell it for a profit because you sold it for more than you bought it for. And then secondly, through income. So many companies, they reward their shareholders by distributing some of their profits to their shareholders in what we call dividends. This most commonly happens twice per year. Or, for example, if you own an investment property, hopefully you sell it for more than you bought it for and you've had the capital growth, but it's also paying you an income through rent while you own the property as well. The goal for many when it comes to investing is to create passive income, essentially creating enough income from their investments to replace their income from employment. So your income from your investments is generating enough income for you to live off, which ultimately gives you the choice of whether or not you want to work. That is what we would consider true financial freedom. But for others, it's just simply to grow their wealth, or grow their money to a point where they can achieve a specific goal as well. So when you're ready to get started, a few things to keep in mind. Investing is for the long term. We should never invest money that we're going to need in the short term. The nature of investing is that it's volatile. There will be more ups and downs than if you just left that money in your bank account. So I will personally never invest money that I need in the next 5 years, because that gives it time to work its magic. Again, time is the magic ingredient when it comes to our finances. You don't need to be wealthy to start. It's how you become wealthy. You can start investing with as little as $5 through micro investing apps, or $500 to $1,000 if you use an online broker or platform. Doesn't have to be complicated. We definitely have a bit of a misconception out there that there's this view of investing that you need to spend hours researching which shares to buy. You need to read the, Australian Financial Review, watch the market segment on the news, follow it closely. No one has time for that. Even I, who completely loves money and investing, I do not want to spend all of my time reading through company annual financial reports. I cannot think of anything worse. You can pay fund managers a small fee to do the hard work for you. You can invest in diversified investments that give you exposure to a whole heap of different companies all at once. So for example, you can buy an investment where your money will automatically be invested across the top 200 or the top 300 companies in Australia. So it doesn't have to be complicated or time consuming. One of the most important principles with investing is diversification. So spreading your investments across different asset classes so that if one investment performs poorly, your whole portfolio isn't affected. So if you had all of your money invested in property, let's say, we know that the property market at the moment is doing some really funky things. So if you had all of your money in property, it's probably experiencing, your portfolio is probably experiencing quite a bit of volatility at the moment. So we don't want to have all of our eggs in one basket. It's going to help you reduce risk and also increase the stability of your investments over time. Investing regularly and making it a part of your day-to-day money plan is important too. So just dedicating money from your cash flow to invest in regular intervals is really going to help you support you in growing your wealth and have your money working for you rather than the other way around. It can feel complex, but empowering yourself with a little bit of information can make the process feel a lot easier. Read books, listen to podcasts, read articles, consider working with a financial planner who can help guide you through the process too. So our final step is invest. Investing is a great way to grow your wealth and secure your financial future. And by following the process of diversifying, keeping it nice and simple, and just getting started, empowered with some information, will go a really long way. And that's it. So thank you so much for listening to me talk about the 6 steps that you can take charge of your money. I'm hyper aware that this probably feels like a lot all at once. So how do we eat an elephant rather? It's one bite at a time. Work your way through the steps at your own pace, but by doing so, you will be in a really wonderful financial position in no time. So thank you so much for joining me. Now I'll open the floor up to any questions. I am aware that we've just gone a little bit over time though.
That was so good, Bec. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For those watching the replay, it's probably best either to email me directly, jackie@tbalaw.com.au, or Bec, do you want to give your email address so that they can get a hold of you too? And then I'll stop the recording to allow people live to ask some questions.
I did have one more slide, sorry. Here is where you can find me. Here's my website, becdillonhensby.com. You can find me on email at hello@becdillonhensby.com, or socials under my own name as well.
Fantastic. Great. All right.